All right, so we're talking about the TTC again, and it's unbelievable with the amount of crime that is going on in the city. It feels like it's all happening at the same time, and it's all over the news. So, 46 minutes ago, this teenager, wait, this 16-year-old was stabbed in Old Mill subway station. I don't even know where that is, right? I think it's one of the new ones up above New York. But anyways, there's a lot of stuff that's happening on the TTC, and I'll talk a bit more about why I feel the TTC set itself up and trained people to do this. Unfortunately, sure, it may sound weird, but listen to me. All right. So, anyways, you see some of these things, right? They're talking about non-stop every day something is happening. That's what I'm saying too. You have this guy that pushed a woman in Toronto on the streets, right? And then you have the transit union calling for some sort of national task force against violent attacks, right? And then it's funny that even the prime minister was swarmed outside something, outside a Hamilton restaurant. I don't know why he would be there, but and then you have this home invasion in the West, and the interesting thing is that this was a condo. I didn't even know that could happen in a condo. That's kind of scary. But anyways, you have the scam there. I don't want to talk about that. Here's the one that I found interesting, or not interesting rather, but scary. So this TTC employee, right, was chased through the subway station by a suspect wielding a syringe. Can you believe that? Somebody has a syringe of something and they're trying to stab you, or and it's like they're not chasing anybody but the TTC employees. So it's quite scary out there, and I don't know what's happening in Toronto, but I'll give you my few insight on, I guess, what I believe is leading up to this point, right? So the mayor is talking about addressing mental health crisis that's happening. I guess they're calling all of these things mental health problems, right? But you have four boys arrested in a TTC swarming attack. So this thing is happening all over the city, and it's actually pretty scary because I've been using the TTC since I was like 9. And I used to call it my home, right? Because I couldn't go back to my real home because my parents didn't really like me. And we always got into arguments and fights like that. So, the TTC was my second home because they had heating, they had air conditioning. You could sit in there and then just sit there and enjoy the ride. And that's what I used to do up until 1 to 2 a.m. And that goes for the streetcar or the subway station. But what I want to talk about and why it led us here is that remember before 2014, right? How the TTC always worked for many years is that you get on in the front, and what happened is you pay, and then the driver's like, pass on, right? So you're vetted, all right? The driver is like vetting you. The driver's like, well, you gotta make your payment, and then you can get on. Let's say you're running, you were doing Uber. If everybody gets on, how do you know somebody is just not, a criminal or something, right? So you gotta be vetted. So in 2014, right, which was about 6 or 7 or 8 years ago. I don't remember how long it was, but 2014, they started this what you call this open presto, open all doors situation with the streetcar. And how the TTC system works is once you get into the transit system, you're able to go anywhere in the city, right? Once you go on into the subway, you can go anywhere too. And that's another reason why I don't use the subway anymore because every time you go on the subway, and you're just sitting there minding your own business, there's some guy that's asking you for money. And I feel uncomfortable like that. I mean, I just want to enjoy my ride, go on my day, and every time you go on to the subway, somebody's asking you for money and they're walking through up and down the train and nobody's doing anything. In the past, if that happened, you have drivers and other people basically coming along and trying to get them out of the TTC system. But now, no, it's like the TTC drivers just want to protect themselves. They're like, they lock themselves in this this secure room that nobody can get in. And basically, everybody else, if something happens in the back, they don't even show up. They're like, we'll wait for somebody else to show up, right? So that's basically what's happening and why it's very scary on the TTC. And I feel like this started in 2014 because they started letting people on in all doors, right? On the TTC. They basically was like, all right, as long as you have a Presto card, you can get onto a streetcar in the back, in the front, or whatnot. So people are started getting on. And they've been training the young people to basically, hey, you just got to get on. It's all free and everything. And sure, there's fare inspectors, but most of the fare inspectors are jokes because they don't even show. Have you seen a fare inspector show up during rush hour? No. Have you seen an inspector show up during when, let's say there was a route that goes through a school with a bunch of students? No. Basically, these students just jump on and then they use the TTC for free. And they've been doing that for the past, I don't know, 5 years at least. And, the TTC policy basically trained these young people to be entitled to getting on the TTC for free. And, this thing is just getting worse and worse and worse. And I feel it's because it's not just the students that's getting on, it's also the people that are homeless that are getting on, right? So it endangers everybody. And at the same time, when you're mixing the homeless and people, riders that pay, then there's a conflict that happens, right? They start fights. And basically, this is where all the stabbing comes into play. And obviously, in a big city like Toronto, that situation, the TTC is actually making it worse because they're not doing. They used to have a good policy, and suddenly they're making like a bad policy to allow everybody on. So I'll give you an example. I was sitting on the TTC. This was during COVID, right? Sometime in 2020 or 2021, somewhere around there, where they still had the stickers that, you only one person per seat, per the dual seats, right? Only one person can sit there. The other one, unless they're traveling with you, they can't sit there. So I'm sitting in this dual seat, and so that means that other seat should be basically empty. You shouldn't sit there because apparently we're trying to protect people from COVID. So this guy, and he was a homeless man, right? So, suddenly there's so many seats out there. Suddenly he wanted to sit beside me, right? I'm like sitting there, what the hell? Why don't you go sit over there, right? I'm thinking in my head, I'm not that type of person. I don't say that, but I'm sitting there. Why are you trying to get into the seat beside me? Because I had my leg up, right, to block anybody from sitting there. And then there were other seats like in the train, right? So he literally wanted to force his way in there. And normal people, depending on who you are, they would probably get into an argument, right? And that's where the crime happens and everything else. And the stabbing, the shooting, whatever, that's where it happens. But for me, the moment he sat down, I just stood up and walked across, like all the way across the train, and I sat somewhere else. But imagine if that was someone else. They'd be like sitting there. There's so many seats over there. Why don't you just go sit somewhere? Why do you need to sit beside me, right? So, especially during COVID, that feels so uncomfortable. And, for other people, they're not like me, right? So they get into these fights, and it's all because the TTC. It's because they changed their policy in 2014. And I feel that is what's causing all of these crime that's happening. Because now you have more people coming to Toronto, and basically they stay in the TTC system to basically just basically live, right? That's what's happening. Unfortunately, they stay in this TTC system, and it's getting worse and worse and worse.